This presentation is all about contextual microlearning. Let me explain. Microlearning as the concept has been around for quite a long time now. We all know about it. It definitely has a lot of advantages over macro learning, like traditional classroom learning and so forth. Now, microlearning still has become a bit more traditional in nature because it's not been able to keep up with our society that seems to have a voracious appetite for information but very little patience for finding that information. I have coined the term contextual microlearning to signify this concept of how you can take microlearning to the next step by bringing information closer to the learner, removing the obstacles of having to search for that information. Contextual microlearning is truly the evolution of traditional microlearning, and that's what we're going to dive into in this presentation. A little bit about me. My name is Asif Rahmani. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called VisualSP that is based in Chicago, Illinois, United States. VisualSP is a contextual microlearning platform. So the concepts that I'll be talking about in this session, our system VisualSP actually automates the execution and implementation of those concepts. I've been in the Microsoft ecosystem for quite some time. Since 2007, I've been a Microsoft MVP, and even before that, I've been a trainer, a mentor for many, many organizations, and a consultant as well. I present at many different conferences, and the session that I'm doing today, I have presented at many conferences as well. So if you do see me at a conference, please stop and say hello. Would love to meet you. Back in the day when I was very technical in nature, I wrote a bunch of books. Those were Microsoft specific ones, but now I talk about the concepts which are much more human in nature and they apply to any technology. My focus still is in the Microsoft ecosystem quite a bit, but I do talk about the end user training, end user support, end user adoption, reducing support tickets, and those types of concepts in every ecosystem. Here's the way you can connect with me through email, through our website, visualsp.com, or use the QR code to go directly to my LinkedIn profile, and you can connect with me there as well. For today's presentation, I'm going to start talking about the history of microlearning first, then we'll dive into understanding the limitations of traditional microlearning, followed by the introduction to contextual microlearning and how that's different from traditional microlearning. Then I'll do a quick quiz, a fun quiz here, so you can guess which type of learning is the one that I'm showing on the screen. Then we'll go over the phases of employee learning need. So in an employee's duration within a company, an organization, they all go through a similar four-phase approach. I'll go and show you that. And at the end, I'll wrap up talking about how to measure learning effectiveness, learning ROI, which is super important if you're going to be able to get the funding to introduce something like this in your organization. The goal of learning is always to absorb information, right? To increase skills, increase ability. Learning is usually acquired through self-study, training, or experience in the field, obviously. It can be fun. Hopefully it is fun. Things like, well, I'm learning to play chess or riding a bicycle, using a software, playing ping pong, whatever it is, it's all learning, whether you're doing it in the classroom, you're doing it outside, anywhere. And once again, at the end of the day, you want to keep the goal of learning in mind as we go through this presentation. The traditional classroom type learning that we are all accustomed with is not as effective anymore. The main challenge is the retention of information. This is, for example, the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. It's a very true representation of how humans retain information, right? I would go even as far to say that for the last couple of decades, the time of retention of new knowledge has gotten even worse than what this shows over here. So if that's the case, then how do you keep up with this challenge? How do you make sure that your users have the information they need at the moment of their need within the context of their environment and within the flow of their work. That's the challenge. Learning itself definitely can be fun, and it is fun, especially when you are excited, you are engaged. But getting trained, that's not as much fun because most of the times you're being told what to do. And at any time when we're being told what to do, then it just doesn't sit well, at least for most people. So sometimes that's not fun. Introducing contextual microlearning, where the learning comes to the learner instead of the learner going to the learning. No need to switch your context. It's all in context to the person. The belief is that it has been proven if you provide less information, but that's in context, it's much better than more information out of context, right? So if I have my answer to something like, for example, what is the policy for naming files before I upload them? I'm not going to go through a whole course or look for that information somewhere. I'm just going to go ahead and do what I need to do. And if I have the information that I need in context to my environment, that is much more important to stuff that's out of context. In fact, a learner should have the information that she needs within 2 clicks and 10 seconds. Yeah? If you're able to do that, you are able to grab the attention of the learner, give them the answer that he or she needs, and they can move on. If it takes more time or more clicks, chances are that you have lost their attention and motivation. There are three main learning delivery options. The first one is macro learning, when you're learning in a deep dive fashion. It's accomplished through a macro learning event such as a class, physical or virtual. Also, macro learning is done through sitting, and just doing a course on an LMS or LXP or LCMS, whatever the learning system that you're using. That's macro learning. Then you have microlearning, which I've been talking about. So traditional microlearning, still you have to go to a destination to learn, like YouTube, or you're learning online or something, but you're searching for the information. It's not in context to begin with, and then you're coming back. A step further is contextual microlearning. Contextual microlearning focuses on the last mile of content delivery. It's delivering the content and information to the user wherever they are at their moment of need, within the flow of their work, and in context of their environment. That's big. That's learning in the flow of work. So what does contextual microlearning really look like in action? I'm going to show you some examples from the web of contextual microlearning. So for contextual microlearning support, just for training people, here's what HubSpot does. Now I'm looking at companies. That's the view in HubSpot specifically, which is a CRM. So as a salesperson, I see all these companies. If I need help in this particular view, instead of going out somewhere, I click on the help icon, which is at the bottom right. You'll see in a second right here. I click on that and an overlay comes on top, which shows me I can search the knowledge base. I can look for the top things on this page or get support for this page also. So very, very specific to the information, the assistance, the learning that I need for this page. Within a couple of clicks, within 10 seconds, I get my answer. That's one view, one example of contextual microlearning. Now think about inline help and support that we get on the web to answer our questions. For example, I'm being asked for my first name and last name on this form that appears on the web somewhere, right? And I'm wondering, why do they need my first name and last name? Well, there's a link over here. I hover over the link and it gives me a pop-up right here, very quickly answering that question in my mind of why that information is needed. Similarly, let's say some new functionality gets released. In this case, it's in HubSpot, but it could be anywhere in a product that I'm using or a product that you're providing to your customers. Either way, giving the answer right there as to here's some new functionality of how you can import and what it means to import. I'm getting the information, I'm getting my answer right here contextually within a couple of clicks, within 10 seconds, without me having to go to a knowledge base somewhere, which most people don't do anyway. They try to fool around with the technology right there, right? So that's inline help and support for contextual microlearning. Interactive guides and balloons. These are called interactive guides, called balloons, tooltips, etc. Something comes up pointing to the exact functionality that I should know about. In this case, it's an animated image and is giving me information that I need to know to get started right away. And I can learn more as well if I needed to go forward. Similarly here, this is showing Microsoft Dynamics environment and is showing in this case when Teams was introduced, Microsoft Teams was introduced within Dynamics. So what Microsoft did in this case was they had this pop-up come up over here, which is telling us, you don't have to go to Teams to collaborate with your fellow sales folks and colleagues. You can just collaborate in Teams directly within Dynamics. Now, I would not have known that that's what this meant right here if this information had not come up. It has to be used in a nice, decent, non-intrusive way to give me the information and get out of my way. But if that's done, that's a great way of having contextual micro assistance, micro learning provided to me. Let's go through some examples to identify what is macro learning, micro learning, or contextual micro learning. Here we go. When you're learning in a class, right? That's physical, virtual class, whatever, but it's a synchronous event that's happening, that's taking place. That's macro learning. You're finding answers to a question through search online. That's micro learning. Quick answer, quick micro, but you're looking for something out there. Inline icon that appears. This particular one is from southwest.com. It's showing that, hey, your early bird check-in that you pay for, that is not refundable. Many people didn't know about this. I didn't know about it. But when you hover over and see, okay, well, it says non-refundable exactly. What does that mean? It tells you, gives you the answer right there. That is contextual microlearning. So it is context specific. I don't have to go looking for that information of what it means, not, when it's not refundable. The information comes to me. This is a hover over tip. This is being shown in a Dynamics 365 CRM, which is a Microsoft owned product. When I hover over the word timeline, it shows me a tooltip of how I can make new timeline events, what are timeline events, and so forth. Once again, information is coming to me. I don't have to go looking for it, and it's very micro in nature. So it's context specific, it's micro in nature. Guess what? That's contextual microlearning. When you're going to look for a video on YouTube to, for example, follow a recipe, making something, that is microlearning. When the same type of video is coming to you, so in this case, I'm in my SharePoint portal, there's an embedded video directly in the SharePoint portal that's right there, right by what I need to take action. So now the information is coming to me. It's short, small, 2 minutes and 33 seconds. That is contextual microlearning. When you're looking for an answer for a question, but it can be done within a couple of seconds. So in this case, for example, I am in Microsoft Teams and there's an icon underneath which I click and I type in my query. I'm able to get the answer very quickly. That answer is right there. It's not too far from me. That's contextual microlearning because it is still within the context. It's not taking me away from Teams in this case. You're taking a course in a learning system. The learning system could be a regular knowledge hub, could be learning management system, learning experience platform, learning content management system. So many different acronyms out there these days, LMS, LXP, LCMS, so forth. Doesn't matter. All that stuff is a macro learning because you're diving in and you're going deep into a specific topic, right? So that's macro learning. Interactive guided step-by-step walkthroughs. This walkthrough came up automatically when I went to a system, in this case, once again, Dynamics. And this walkthrough is showing me around different things. It's giving me information about where my leads are located as a salesperson in this particular persona. That is contextual microlearning. The context does not change. The overlay is right there in my context, in the application. That's why this is contextual microlearning. What about this one? I'm sure most of us are aware of the product called ServiceNow, right? I manage my service tickets as a service personnel over there. And one day a banner comes on top. It's telling me, hey, email server is down. We're aware of this issue and taking steps to correct it. Think of this type of banner announcement. Could this information, could that have been delivered through email? Obviously not, because email server itself is down. So that's why where I was located, which is in ServiceNow, this information came to me. This banner came to me, right? That email server is down. It followed me where I am instead of me searching for where it is. So it is definitely context specific. Am I learning something? I am. So it is contextual micro learning. But in this case, it goes even beyond just micro learning. It's micro delivery of any information, right? So imagine here, learning in the flow of work, that's context specific, fine, that's micro learning. But you can have additional types of micro delivery of information. That could be support information in the flow of work, communication delivered in the flow of work, information in the flow of work. All of these things combined are referred to as contextual experiences. Context does not change, and I get the information that I'm looking for within my context. Contextual experience. Definition of contextual experience is basically the right content at the right time in the right place is being delivered to me. Okay? The visualization of information, it's being presented to me where I am. It's either embedded or overlaid on top of a system that I'm working with. Once again, information coming to me instead of me going to the information. That is a contextual experience that lights up for me. Let me show you an example of a contextual experience and how I was helped in my own flow of work with that experience. This is an actual screenshot of the thumbnail view of one of my slide decks from many, many years back. Okay. It always had good information, in my humble opinion, but they all looked very, very plain, white, black, gray, some pictures or tables here and there, but mostly it's all just like that. Now, here's how my presentations look today. It's also a thumbnail view from one of my recent presentations. What changed? Why did it become so more vibrant and colorful and better designs? Well, it happened because one day I was introduced to this capability within Microsoft PowerPoint called Designer. Here's what it looks like. This is Designer right here. I'm sure many of you are aware of this as well. One day I was putting some image in one of my PowerPoint decks, one of my slides, and automatically this designer came up on the right saying, hey, do you want your slide to look like this instead? Right? So it gave me these different examples of how my slide deck, my slide specifically in that case, could look much more vibrant without me having to do anything. A contextual experience that was presented to me. Obviously, that delighted me, and that's what I've been using ever since. It's not just important to know what type of learning to provide, macro, micro, contextual, micro. It's equally important to understand when to provide what type of learning to your users. Otherwise, they might not be open to the appropriate time, appropriate learning at that time. So having said that, think about WIIFM, the concept, what's in it for me. I'm sure you've heard of WIIFM. The way I refer to WIIFM is radio WIIFM. So what I mean by that is that this radio station, WIIFM, is always playing in our minds, right? Are we going to tune into that frequency of our users, of our employees, of our colleagues? Are we going to empathize with them? Tuning into the radio station WIIFM of our colleagues, others, anybody around us, that's what it means to empathize with them. And if you don't tune in to the others' radio WIAFM, they will tune you out. If you can't match the frequency, if you cannot understand before being understood, guess what? It's going to be very easy for them to tune you out. Let's talk about the various phases of learning that an employee, anybody, goes through. So here are the 4 phases. Number 1, learning something new. I'm learning something fresh and new for the first time because maybe I was hired on into this company for the first time, or I just joined a new department, right, or a new team. So I'm learning something, learning lots of new information, brand new information through the fire hose. So much information coming in. The second phase is when you're digging deeper while working, learning in the flow of work. In that case, you're expanding the breadth and depth of your knowledge, work experiences, water cooler conversations, talking to colleagues, and so forth. Third one is when problems occur and you need to troubleshoot those problems. So solving problems or resolving issues when things don't work the way they should. And number 4, many people went through this thing during COVID where we had to retrain and upskill ourselves, learning new ways of doing something to adapt to the change. And that's a big one, right? When things change, how will you react to it? How will you adapt to those new ways of doing things and unlearning the old ways of doing things? So that's the 4 phases that an employee goes through in their journey from beginning until they retire. Here's a depiction of the employee learning journey in a graph. When an employee begins their journey, she's provided macro learning in the form of physical, virtual, whatever kind of running, and then that's right there, right? After the macro learning is done, the employee is provided continuous micro learning. That's contextual micro learning, and that's right there. That's where you're learning in the flow of work, continuing to boost your knowledge. Then comes the dip, unfortunately, for most people, where you become an experienced employee. The regular motions become repetitive, pace of learning slows down. What do you do as a company when that happens? Now, usually at that time, the company decides to provide another boost of macro learning. So that's this blue over here, right? This works marginally well, and employees' learning increases a bit due to the boost of knowledge. But ideally, what you really want to do instead is provide contextual microlearning at this point. That usually does not happen, but it should happen because in this ideal situation, the contextual microlearning will continue to enhance that employee's knowledge at her moment of need and within the flow of work. After a macro event takes place, so a macro learning event, like a synchronous class or even asynchronous learning that you're doing through a learning management system, automatic reminders can be sent to the learners to reinforce parts of that learning. And that can be done through contextual microlearning. So a contextual experience can be configured, and I'll give an example of that, to present itself automatically at for example, following periods after a macro learning event. Let's say after 2 days, after 2 weeks, after 2 months. Something specifically happens within the learners, the person's, the employee's environment that gets them re-engaged with that learning that took place before. Let me give you an example. Let's say a scheduled announcement banner after a class has already concluded, it comes up automatically and it comes up for spaced repetition of learning. I'm sure you're familiar with the spaced repetition, which works really well. So here's the example. I'm an employee and I am a salesperson working in Dynamics 365 sales environment. Now I'm looking at all my active accounts right here. I'm working. Automatically a banner comes up on top, this blue banner. It says, let's take a quick 1-minute assessment of the closing complex sales course you took 2 weeks ago. And after this comes up, this briefly blinks over here, the start button, showing this is how you get started. Now, I'm already in the flow of work. I'm doing something over here, so I just ignore the banner to begin with. I'm doing things and it's not bothering me. I'm just going across, doing what I need to do. When I'm ready and I say, well, this will give me credit if I take this quick assessment, let me go ahead and do it. And it's just 1 minute. So I click on the start button. And this very, very short closing complex sales quiz comes up with information that I had learned from that closing complex sales course. So it's helping me refresh my memory. It's been 2 weeks in this case. It's asking me a couple of quick questions. I answer those questions. I submit. And as soon as I do that, this information goes to my manager. So she knows the information I have already gotten a refresher on. I got some refresher knowledge from things that I was forgetting. It's been a couple of weeks. So that's contextual microlearning, right? And then I click on the X over here and go back to where I was. I don't have to go anywhere to get that information. The information came to me. That's the beauty of this whole thing. How do you quantify success with the end user training and support efforts that you're putting out there? Without quantifying success, you're just shooting in the dark and hoping things will work out. That's not an effective way to measure success. We have to agree upon some specific metrics of success. Now, calculating return on investment of various organizational learning, here are a few different ways you can make that happen, some very specific metrics to calculate monetary value creation or or amount of money saved and or amount of time saved. Keeping these specific metrics in mind that really matter to you, you can prove that things are working towards the right direction. Otherwise, well, you're just doing stuff, and that cannot be proven. And if it cannot be proven, you cannot get funding to do more of it, and there's just no impact. So let's dig deeper in there. To measure ROI of macro learning, it's fairly simple. The return, the benefit that you get, divided by the investment, the cost that you had, that returns the ROI. So for example, the cost of a training, let's say was $1,000. The return, the benefit, let's say was $2,000 because now we have less accidents on the factory floor over period of time that you have looked upon, assessed. So $2,000 was determined to be the benefit, 1,000 was the cost. ROI, very simple, that's 200%. Okay, that's macro learning for a particular class, LMS, or so forth. That's how you measure the ROI for any kind of macro learning. To measure the ROI for microlearning or contextual microlearning, either one, that gets much deeper. This is research that our company, VisualSP, has been doing for a long, long time. So I'm going to talk about that research and show you exactly the formulas of that. First, number of hours saved in productivity. That's how many actual microlearning assets, which could be walkthroughs, videos, inline help, any kind of contextual experience that was accessed, times 15 minutes. Reason for 15 minutes, that's the average time to find an answer and get back to task at hand. So we're talking about someone who was deep in a zone working on something. That person had to get out, look for the answer, and then come back in the zone. That's 15 minutes. That's been proven. There's formulas out there, there's research out there that proves that on an average, 15 minutes are lost looking for a specific answer. So that's why we use the number 15 minutes. And then that's divided by 60 minutes per hour to get the number of hours saved in productivity. So that's the first formula. The second one here is money saved in productivity. Number of hours saved, which is the result of the first formula, times $26. $26 is the average hourly rate in the USA for a person who will be providing support. Okay, so that's how this is calculated. The average hourly rate times number of hours equals money savings and productivity. The ROI measurement should never stop, in my humble opinion. It should be ongoing, preferably automatic, so you always have your finger on the pulse of your organization learning effectiveness for microlearning and for contextual microlearning. Let me give you an example to make all this stuff super clear. Let's say for an organization, microlearning assets accessed within 1 month were 5,000. 5,000 times a various amount of different microlearning assets were accessed. This organization has 1,000 employees. Okay, so keep those things in mind as we go through the formula. Number of hours saved in productivity, you take 5,000 times 15 minutes divided by 60, you got 1,250 hours. Money saved in productivity cost, that's 1,250 hours times $26 equals $32,500. So that's your three figures. 5,000 was the actual assets that were actually utilized, how many hours saved, how much money saved in productivity. Makes things super simple, super clear, and makes it very effective to prove the actual impact, the actual usage, and then the impact of this microlearning or contextual microlearning that you're doing. You want to keep the presentation of the ROI for microlearning or contextual microlearning to be super simple. So for example, having a dashboard that automatically increments every time something is accessed. In this case, it's showing that for the month, 5,000 help items were viewed, 1,250 person hours saved, taking that answer time to Google, answer on Google or Bing or whatever per question, and then savings in productivity. This is based on US salary, but you can have it where you can provide other salaries as well, for UK, Europe, Asia, so forth. But just having a very easy formula like that and having the presentation also be super simple, that is adjusted on a regular daily, weekly, monthly, whatever you think is the best basis, that helps quite a bit. So at the end of the day, you want to implement contextual micro delivery scenarios, contextual experiences in your organization. You can start with some simple solutions that are free or more advanced solutions that are not free but does do things automatically. And give you, for example, the ROI, give you the contextual experiences, have them delivered to your employees automatically. Either way, you want to start somewhere to bring the information as close as possible to your employees. Bottom line, providing learning, support, communication, any kind of information within the flow of work and making it easy for your employees to get benefit from it immediately. Here are my recommended call to actions, what you can do to get started immediately. Identify all the existing microlearning artifacts that exist in your organization. Okay, so we're talking about walkthroughs, videos, quick tip sheets, any kind of tooltips or anything that you have currently already that's there. Identify them, create other ones that are not there, critical ones that are missing, create that quick documentation. Once again, make it micro, so make it small, specific. Then position that microlearning as close as possible to the learner's moment of need. Provide them all in context. Doesn't matter if it's a factory worker that's actually going to a machine and seeing the actual paper on the machine that tells them exactly what it is, which is contextual micro assistance or microlearning, or if it's a person who is sitting on the computer looking at some software and they need help, and providing them information as close as possible as an overlay directly within context of their environment. Just make the information as close as possible to the learner's moment of need. And then also, don't forget to implement a system of collection of ROI metrics that are being collected automatically and on a regular basis. That is going to help you and your organization understand the effect, the impact that it's all this effort, money, time that is being spent on this stuff is having on the bottom line. Let's recap some of the points we talked about. Contextual microlearning is much more effective than traditional microlearning. Go beyond just microlearning and provide everything in context. Provide all information to the users in their flow of work. It really, really works. Continuously measure learning effectiveness of contextual microlearning, because without the measure, you don't know exactly the impact. Here's who you've been listening to. Once again, my name is Asif Rahmani. If you would like to reach out to me with your questions on context-sensitive support and training, you can use this email address, asif@visualsp.com. And feel free to download this presentation, any other presentation that I have. Everything's on this site, bit.ly/Asif Conference. If you would like help in creating a contextual microlearning platform that automates all the things that I've talked about in terms of creation of contextual microlearning information, presentation, delivery, ROI, measurement, check out visualsp.com. That's our company. That's where we do all of these things. Let us know if you have any questions. If you want to discuss anything, we're here for you. Best wishes to your success.